Today we are launching two books, Shooting, Ashwin Singh's debut novel, and Durban Dialogues Dissected, an analysis of Ashwin Singh's plays. The latter book was edited by Dr. Felicity Hand, senior lecturer in the English department at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. It features critical essays on Ashwin Singh's 8 published plays by academics and cultural practitioners from 4 continents. We are delighted to have the managing editor of MicroMega Publications, Mr. Singh, here today. You'll find him at the bookstand if you're looking out for him. He is the publisher of Shooting, and he's doing a tremendous job to stimulate the reading culture in South Africa, something that we certainly need. We are equally delighted to have joining us via Zoom today the Managing Director of African Sun Media, Mr. Nirode Bramdaw, and the Publishing Manager, Mr. Spanzer. African Sun Media is the publisher of Durban Dialogues Dissected and is arguably the leading publisher of scholarly works in South Africa. There are 2 parts of today's proceedings, so I'm afraid to take us a bit of time. Part 1 is the launch of Shooting, and part 2 is the launch of Durban Dialogues Dissected. So let's commence with the launch of Shooting. We will start with the reading of 3 excerpts from the novel by Lawson, Derosha Moodley, and Ashwin Singh. I'll hand you over to them.
Johannesburg is a city of contradictions. It is a sprawling metropolis, decaying at its center, but containing several luscious suburbs, populated by a multicultural mix of South Africa's super-rich business and professional classes. It is Africa's economic powerhouse, but also one of its violent crime capitals. Its elite class mixes easily across the Calabar, claiming it as the nation's exotic playground. But the not so rich, the downright poor, do not venture out of their racial enclave. For every act of kindness from a stranger, there is another of cruel indifference from a perceived friend. I never settled in the city or in the labor relations firm. Soon I was a legal advisor for an insurance company, and I realized that now I did the same job as my friend Sanjeev Maharaj, but without going to court and for slightly more money, of course. But I had set out a 3-year, and then a few weeks later, a 5-year plan to acquire the necessary experience and financial security so that I could take more risks in landing the right job back in Durban. As I stumbled through each day in that exhausting place, I began shooting again. I wrote letters of colourful deception to my mother, and on my occasional trips to Durban, I told my friends over copious volumes of alcohol many dazzling tales of a life they wished they were leading. My boring days drafting contracts were presented as high-powered negotiations with sophisticated businessmen. My mundane weekends writing my master's dissertation and drinking in the local bar were reimagined as intoxicating adventures in sultry nightclubs. My tumultuous relationship with my girlfriend with a borderline personality disorder was repositioned as a passionate exploration of the Kama Sutra's pleasures. I was pursuing my dream in an eclectic city filled with the dashing and daring people of the Rainbow Nation. Then one day, my alarm bell rang particularly loudly at 5:30 a.m. It was my 32nd birthday, and my 5-year plan was over.
Later that week, my mom drove us to the Pavilion Shopping Center in my dad's old Fiat. Auntie Shanti sat up front, and my cousins and I squeezed into the back. We were scolded several times for talking gibberish and making unnecessary wild movements. But this did nothing to dampen my spirits. Our monthly trips to the PAL always filled me with jubilation. But on that day, I was particularly excited because we had extra money from Uncle Tony to lavish on best quality food and beverage. As we entered the parking lot again, I admired the magnificent dome-shaped design of the mall, and even my young mind could appreciate the intelligent ergonomics. The place was buzzing, as usual, despite the fact that it was a midweek afternoon. The pavilion was a three-tier retail and entertainment complex constructed along the lines of an American mall, and therefore consisting of a variety of chain stores, exclusive boutiques, restaurants, movie theaters, and other entertainment zones. Durban had experienced a surge in mall culture in the 90s, partly due to the deterioration of the CBD, but mainly because of the diverse features of these cavernous arenas. The pavilion was one of the largest and most popular of the malls, and I had enjoyed some precious afternoons there, watching movies, gobbling hot dogs, and playing eye games with the pretty girls. It was not the place, though, where my mom could do her grocery shopping. Due to her limited budgets, she did that at the local grocers, but we came to the pavilion once a month to indulge in it. This mainly involved me eating and her searching for any bargains on clothing, toys, and comfort foods. Sometimes I would watch her carefully in the stores. The boys' fashion wear section. I knew that she wanted to buy me that check shirt, but her brow creased as she calculated whether she could afford it, and then she sadly forgave them. And then in the hypermarket, could she buy the new cream cheese and the buttercream melting moments? No, just a cream cheese. I still watch mothers in grocery stores, trying to get the best for their children, and often putting the products back in the shelf.
Uncle Tony's eyes bulged like a bloodthirsty savage. He grabbed the dirty plastic pipe that was lying on the veranda and ran at his son like a bull would charge a matador. I'll show you what that thug you worship, you miserable fuck. Ishan tried to run, but he tripped over his own feet. I didn't know what to do. I was rooted to the ground, my mouth forming a silent scream. Uncle Tony bashed his son with a pipe. Once, twice, thrice, more time. I tried to drown out Ishan's screams, and finally the pipe broke, and Uncle Tony stopped. He looked at his son for a moment. There seemed to be tears in his eyes. Then he walked away slowly and sat on the veranda, his head in his hands. I ran to Ishan. He just lay there motionless. His eyes looked dead. Suddenly I heard Aunt Angie shout from the distance, "I'll call the police, John. Come here, my boy. Bring your cousin and come here." But I wasn't going to walk away. The beast begged to be released. I sprinted to Uncle Tony and pushed him over. "You hit a little boy, you thug! That's your son, you heartless shit!" I punched wildly, but he blocked easily and then caught me square on the jaw. I stumbled comically and then toppled over like a sack of wheat. "Yeah, you got me, Uncle Tony," I said, my voice crackling and my eyes rolled up. "You knocked me down, you oaf." He just looked at me blankly. Aunt Angie courageously ran across the yard to attend to my cousin and me. As she examined Ishan, I sat up slowly, and then to my astonishment, I saw Aunt Shanti walk purposefully up the driveway. She was dressed in a pale blue sari, her hair blowing gently in the breeze. There was a steely determination in her eyes. I wondered for a moment if Uncle Tony's punch had rendered me unconscious, and whether I was in fact dreaming. The sudden appearance of Aunt Shanti seemed ghostly. I realized that it was real, but she held my hand and said in her usual serene way, "Go with Aunt Angie, John. I'll take care of Ishan." There seemed to be some sort of invisible force that propelled me towards Aunt Angie. The throbbing of my jaw began to subside as well. I saw Uncle Tony stare at Aunt Shanti as if she had just come back from the dead. He moved awkwardly towards her, but she put her hand on his chest and then pushed him so hard that he stumbled over the veranda steps and collapsed onto his deck chair. There was an uncanny silence. Aunt Shanti calmly lifted her son as if he was merely a toddler. He put his arms around her neck, and then she walked briskly past Aunt Angie and I, down the driveway, and into the same rusting Toyota she had entered at the beginning of the new millennium.
It can give you a very nice taste of what the novel actually is, approximately the entire novel. So hopefully we've chosen the right examples to let you outside and get you interested in the work as well. Shortly we'll feature the artist and foundation of the novel. But now we welcome on stage to speak on behalf of MicroMega Publications, Dr. Naidoo. Kiru is an academic, author, civil servant, and activist. Please welcome Dr. Kiru.
Please join me in a round of applause for Ashwin Singh. The remarkable debut novel, and we're really very pleased as MicroMega to be involved in the publication of it. I'm the prettier half of the partnership, which is why Ashwin asked me to speak. But I also identify fully with the title of this book. I'm a bit of a shooter myself. Or in Chatsworth, they would call me a thriller or an angada, but you get the drift. This is really remarkable as a debut novel. The storyline is just something so rich, so layered, just so textured, and gathers just a multitude of themes that we rarely see in this kind of literature. And this is not blowing bubbles up your behind. It's just powerful that from this city, that's a UNESCO city of literature, that we're able to produce prose of this quality. So not only do I want to commend this book to you because the publisher's children need to stop eating brown bread and drinking Kool-Aid, but it's a phenomenal literary work. And it builds on an already tremendous track record that Ashwin Singh has in this wonderful city of ours. Whether in theatre, whether in academia, in publishing, in a whole range of other areas that he's been involved in. So books are a very difficult terrain in our country. Books are just public publishing has become such a hugely expensive enterprise. Tyler Reddy, who many of you will be familiar with from the English Academy of South Africa, described MicroMega as having a powerful role in the democratization of publishing. Because in the way the publishing industry has been, not just in South Africa, but globally, there were all kinds of gatekeepers to publishing. And I'm very pleased that over the last several years, Anivesh has taken such huge risks in being able to bring new authors out, take risks with books that might not necessarily have been publishable in the view of the established publishers. And I'm pleased now that he's able to attract an established playwright and theatre personality and now novelist like Ashwin Singh. So this space around publishing is going great guns in our UNESCO City of Literature. And I think that the kind of work that Anivesh and those around him have been able to do has really been tremendous. But just attendant to that is this whole resurgence of a reading culture in our city. For some time, we lamented the fact that our children don't read anymore, people are not buying books, that fewer people are visiting libraries or bookshops. In fact, bookshops shutting down altogether. One of the great travesties of our times was for Adam's Bookshop to close in so many different venues. And even now, so many other bookshops are at great risk. But in spite of that, Anivesh and a whole range of other people around him, and I want to pay special tribute to the Dennis Hervey Center, which has partnered with us as the Durban Book Fair, MicroMega, and the other institutions we've gathered together to create projects like Streetlit and the booksellers of Mzansi, who you've no doubt seen around the city, where we created a project, passion project, as Anivesh likes to say, where homeless people are able to take donated books and sell those and earn a dignified living without having to beg on the street or be a nuisance to anyone. And it's wonderful work by people like Ila Thompson and Raymond Perrier and others, where we've been able to bring this partnership together. So I hope that what we're seeing is not just a resurgence of literature and the theatre and the arts in general in our city, but we're also seeing growing partnerships among these different institutions. And I hope that that's going to grow manyfold. We have the Durban Book Fair on every first Sunday of the month. COVID tempered our programs considerably, but we still kept it going, both in the Mitchell Park on every first Sunday and online. And I want to invite those of you who have not been part of that to visit with us. The next book fair is on the 4th of April. But enough of the advertising from my side. I'm so very pleased to see so many of you that we haven't seen in ages. It's glory to God that we're all still alive and thriving, and great sadness that we've lost so many people close to us. But these are very difficult times, and it's wonderful that amidst all of these crises that we're able to have a book like this and to be able to celebrate it and come together in this way. So thank you all very much for sharing in this great enterprise of Ashwin Singh's debut novel. And I want to extend the congratulations and good wishes from MicroMega and all our fraternal bodies every success with this novel. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a runaway success. Congratulations and thank you.
Well, we actually now know the real reason that Kiro was nominated by Anivesh. He's clearly in charge of marketing. I mean, who could have told you so much information in just 5 minutes? But all vital information as well. Please support the book fair. I think it's an incredible initiative. We also have a number of books on display behind you, shall remind you of later as well. But we do need to stimulate a better reading culture. That's exciting. Now, we welcome again for a discussion on the novel academic performing artist Derosha Moodley, actor, director, and theatre mentor Lawson, and the author himself. Derosha will be leading the conversation with Ralph and Ashwin, who, as you know, have collaborated on several theatre projects in Durban and the wider world. Derosha himself has performed in several of Ashwin's plays, and he's currently teaching his plays at House at the Pearson Institute of Higher Education. The topic of their discussion is Deferred Dreams, the forgotten people of small-town post-apartheid South Africa. And your Derosha.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be amongst the arts and literary community once again. So I'd like to welcome you all to our on-stage conversation, being broadcast to a live studio audience and an online audience. Today, I have the pleasure of posing a couple of questions to the writer of Shooting, Ashwin Singh, and prominent theatre director, Lawson. In kicking off my questions, I'd like to summate some of the topical concerns that Shooting covered in what I thought to be a truthful commentary on the state of small-town communities in South Africa in the 90s coming to the early millennium. So in a myriad of small-town struggles, small-town community struggles, the narrative of Shooting covers issues of crime, physical violence, domestic violence, discursive violence, and the various issues of domestic duty Indian women face. I found particularly encouraging and uplifting that amongst these tragic moments in the life of our protagonists, Jahan and Shan, that they lie interwoven in their struggle a detailed account of communal gathering, good parenting, sportsmanship, and the strength of the Black Brotherhood that allowed the story to not only communicate the journey of the post-colonial South African Indian male, but communicate how hope can be cultivated by members living within a hopeless circumstance. And on that note of pushing oneself out of a difficult situation to progress, I would like to commence with the topic of today's discussion being deferred dreams, the forgotten people of small-town post-apartheid South Africa. So my first question is to Ashwin. Shooting is about poor people from the Indian South African community. Why was it important for you to write about these people?
I believe that they are underrepresented in world literature, even in local literature. There is a perception, a misperception, that there are a lot of rich Indian business people and academics and professionals. And some of these people, to be honest, display their wealth in obscene manner, so that this becomes the norm of how the Indian is perceived in South Africa. I wanted to break that stereotype. I wanted to present the fact that the majority of people of Indian origin in South Africa are living in poverty, just like the majority of Black African people in South Africa. And that despite some powerful efforts, we have not been able to overcome these terrible hardships of the poor of this nation. And I think they needed a voice. And I think individuals within those communities needed to feature as dominant characters in a work of literature, which is seldom the case anywhere in the world from these particular communities.
So you represented the stereotype and presented it in order to comment on it, to critically comment on it.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I was particularly interested in something Pravesh said in the confrontation with Jahan after the murder had occurred. For this, Pravesh, even in his really sorry state of living, was able to fathom the importance of storytelling because of Jahan's constant proclamations of glory on Ishan's sportsmanship. Pravesh and Michael, the drug dealers of the novel, were able to respect Jahan and Ishan and remember them, and it was all because of Jahan's shooting tales. So even the minor characters who could easily be forgotten by the reader, like characters like Pravesh, I felt like they were represented in a more positive light, rather than the dread drug dealing identities were. So I was very interested in the positive representation of drug dealers, even in the dread that they were.
I think this is nothing new. There's a narrative that's well known about people who are involved in criminal activity, who have layered personalities. If you're going to write a work of literature, you have to understand human beings, or at least pretend to do, and to present them in all of their complexity and contradiction. That's what I've tried to do in the novel, as I try to do in my plays and films. We cannot simply dismiss people as one-dimensional monsters. The truth of the matter is that they even began to understand in some redemptive way of their mistakes were regarding these young boys. But they're not wonderful people who have a magnificent transformation. They just shift positions slightly, as I would suggest literature should present in order to examine them in all their complexities.
My next question is for both Ashwin and Ralph. Do you foresee a better life for the poor people of small-town South Africa, particularly given the impact of widespread public sector corruption and the ravages of your pandemic?
One would love to wave all those positive flags, slogans, such as adversity brings people together. That sort of thing. I think there is some element of possibility in that. I do think that we are reaching a point perhaps in South Africa now where this degree of adversity as represented by corruption, etc., is putting us together in a way that perhaps is positive. I would hope so. For the rest, all I can do is quote Shakespeare, which I sometimes do when I feel a bit hopeless. He said in Richard III, "But shall I?" And Queen Anne said back to Richard III, "All men, I hope, live so."
Well, I mean, look, I essentially endorse your sentiments. I believe, though, that there is a groundswell of activity happening right now as we speak, in fact, around the country from a variety of civil organizations, civil society organizations, including some out here like the ACM, the Active Citizens Movement, Charter Foundation, many others, who are actually banding together and bringing more people into their movements to recognize that whilst we must obviously be critical of government and hold it to account, we have to do something ourselves to uplift people out of poverty, to provide opportunities, and many small businesses are doing that. Big business could take the lead from small businesses to empowerment of people economically, but also the pandemic has forced us to take these actions, forced us to look at potential to become a better species, which we need to do or we'll lose this world, we won't get through this century. And I think that there's definitely a genuine attempt by many people, including some of our own scholars, some of whom are here. I won't mention them by name because they feel embarrassed, but who are leading us, the people of South Africa, to take action in order to overcome some of these terrible challenges we still face. But of course, I also would like to add, and I may upset some people, that I'm disappointed in the way we are led, very much so, and I think there's no hiding from this. We've got to know these people who come, they let us down, and we must not make excuses for them anymore. But we must also not bitch and moan. We need to take action, and too many people talk and don't do it. If we do it, the people in this novel will be uplifted, will be empowered. But it's up to us.
For Ashwin, the novel is also about the idiosyncratic experiences of extended Indian South African families. Could you describe some of the complexities and contradictions of living in an extended Indian family as explored in the novel?
Yes, certainly. It'll take me to Monday morning, but I'll just give you as kind of like a summary. In the extended family, which I've been part of, although you probably have been part of also, there are many rituals that happen which are interesting, can be divisive at times, but generally are empowering and bring people together. A lot of it revolves around being able to talk to a lot of people, because you have so many voices, so many ears, that you can confront a number of issues. So you never feel lonely. You're always entertained. There's always some eccentric person in your family who tells you funny jokes and who provides entertaining stories and also helps you grow through those stories. So through the generations, you get rich information about the world and how you should navigate. However, it can also then force you to constantly be surrounded by people and never feel that you can have alone time. You can't hide. Yes, absolutely. And of course, there's a ritual of food, which even in the poor communities here, I mean, they try their best to make sure that they have at least one tree to eat. And then everybody's invited, and it becomes even a bigger extended family because the neighborhood joins them. And that leads to camaraderie and deeper connections with the community as well. But of course, other times there's a major challenge because there's so many mouths to feed in the extended family. And so, you're just having dry bread sometimes because, there's just isn't anything. But at the same time, I think the situation like here, they would eat like sugar beans for 3 days and then suddenly they have a fabulous booze for dinner. Perhaps they should have maybe, on a little piece of that on Monday and then on Tuesday rather than a big celebration. But that's how it is, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of, there's a joyous celebration. And I think those things exist, but then, as Apple also points out, and as I'm sure you're aware, things are covered up as well, extended families. Abuse, particularly domestic abuse, is often not exposed to the wider community because of the fear of the reprisals and the shame. And I think that still exists to this day. It's not every family, it's not every extended family in any community, but certainly in some families it's the case that it can be more easily repressed. And of course, there's still patriarchy. So the man is still king, even in some of the more enlightened families. And that's something that needs to be careful of. Yes, absolutely. That's why I got away with quite a bit as well.
Talking about repressed values or repressed opinions is there are moments where tradition can teach and then there are moments where the tradition can repress too. And that's one of the complexities of navigating living within an extended Indian domestic situation. Uncle told me, if he was able to manage his really poor self-conception, then I think his stances on issues of race and governance, which were quite progressive, would have enlightened his family unit as well. But that is one of the idiosyncrasies of living in an Indian family, is that struggle between that traditional ways of living and gender roles, and then trying to progress toward modern ways of living, modern gender. For Ralph, the next question. You've collaborated with Ashwin on several creative productions. How did you feel reading a work of fiction by him as opposed to interrogating his play scripts? Of course, shooting is also a stage play, so please tell us what you think about the story in the performance mode.
It's a very interesting question. It made me think quite hard. It's usually done the other way around. We usually adapt novels into plays or films. I think this is, as far as I'm concerned, in my experience, an absolute first. So it's, well, I may be wrong, but I stand corrected, but certainly in my experience it is. I think what typifies Ashwin's plays, I should say, is a particular play like, which is one of my favorites, Ryoka Light, a one-man play, is it's redolent with atmosphere, the atmosphere of the community of Ryoka Light and of the character in particular. I think that, of course, it goes without saying, it's been remarked on in our little address here too, that the novel is full of that. It articulates that so wonderfully. So, from a point of view of a theatre director, that is really a gift. It gives you literally a kind of template in which to create the play, and it points to the atmosphere that you were striving to achieve. Having said that, of course, perhaps if we define a novel as a fictitious prose narrative that represents typically character and action with some degree of realism, I mean, that's interchangeable with the play, actually. Possibly the only difference would be that there's a strong degree of realism in the play, however stylized it is, simply because one is in a one-on-one relationship with a live audience. A novel is perhaps could be defined as a fictional narrative. I found this something that provides a deeper understanding of human nature. Well, what is a play? So I think we're at the end of the day simply talking about form. I mean, there are other questions which I hope we might be able to air here, and that is the one of one's accessibility. How accessible are plays to people if they're perhaps not that mad about being in the theatre, but by the same token, how accessible are novels about things that I could take them up. So that's another question. I would say that the two are interchangeable. I found both plays and this particular novel, as I say, redolent with the kind of meaty atmosphere, character, and that really moved myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I like that. Ralph represented me as an experienced director to speak about that, but I would say that a play really focuses on interpersonal conflict, and a novel gets you into the mind of the lead characters, probably in more detail, the psyche, more than a play might be able to do. And also, of course, obviously, a play is driven by dialogue, and the novel has many descriptive passages.
Writing also provides the tool and the tool that can be consistent in communicating shades, personalities, and identities of the character, which I think sometimes performance can't give you due to time. But for me as an actor, I appreciate Jahan and Nishan's story because there was more exposition and there was detail for performance and subtext. But as a teacher, I found that novel to have absolute teaching them in the narrative of the post-colonial Naidoo. And there was a specific moment that I'd like to mention when Tony was afraid of dropping off Spiso in Ashwin, and it brought back moments of the ABL tragedy in Durban. And that's something for me to hold on as a teacher in the classroom. So I'm going to find this novel really rich in the classroom. The next question is for both Brown and Ashwin. Looking at the novel as an art form in comparison to the play as an art form, what are the essential differences for you? The play is often viewed as incomplete until stage and interrogated in the stage form. It can therefore be undervalued on the page by cultural and academic institutions. What are your views on this?
Well, yes, I think that is the case. And I think, I think famous Indian playwright Naidoo said about 2 years ago that when he examines his work, when people who see it in the theatre talk about it, they don't at all complain about the fact that they're not going to read it, or that it doesn't read like a novel if they do read it. But academics consider him inferior because it's a playwright. They prefer novels. That has become the great academic tool of analysis of the 20th and 21st century, the novel. Of course, the play was dominant for 2 centuries as well. And of course in Africa way before. So I think that is just academic snobbery. And also perhaps maybe also academic inferiority, in that they are unable to read. That sounds a bit arrogant. But I also think that novel is definitely easier to read for the modern audience now, because how often do we teach plays at school? Very few, and we don't teach them at university very much either. Felicity later on, when she's on, will speak about that. So I think in that sense, the issue of comparison there is something that we need to look at if we teach plays. Otherwise, of course, as I've mentioned already, I don't repeat myself, there is that the play has dialogue only, monologue, and the novel obviously offers scripted passages, and also offers more opportunity, bigger and longer usually, to examine the psyche of the main characters in more depth than a play might be. Also, a play, of course, is a communal experience. A novel can be read quietly in your room, so obviously the person appreciating art is the key person, and the experience is very different in the two forms.
But in saying that, it's important to acknowledge that literary studies at higher education level now are progressing. There are myriad of texts being studied, there are plays being studied, there are literary students performing plays in classes. So I'm glad that we're going that route of exploring different types of forms within the literary realm.
Well, certainly I know it's popular people, that's wonderful. Yeah, I just think that maybe sometimes we don't study plays with the same feather that we used to do years ago.
Yeah, I'm just wondering that perhaps, at tertiary education stage, that isn't too late. I mean, should we really be talking about the problem of getting these literacy and the idea of reading a play into a classroom very early on? It's rather interesting that the subject of teaching Shakespeare, I'm sorry to mention this all the time, I am in the presence of a great player, that should Shakespeare be taught in schools, and very often teachers are perhaps not produced up to it, particularly if they're not teaching mother tongue, etc. And there's a very strong argument for abandoning the idea of making the children plow through Hamlet or Macbeth or those plays in the classroom, and rather subject them to performance of it. And as a starting point anyway, and to go from there, I think that's very valid in a way, because there is very strong data that they can put on, quite frankly, from ever to it. And I think the same could be said really of reading as well. Both, of course, are meant to entertain and tell a story, aren't they? Novels and plays. There are so many areas which are where they interlink and where they actually cross. It's an interpretation of life, really, isn't it? It's to entertain, to elucidate. They both try to do the very same thing. So I would say let's look at the question of literacy early on in the education system in order to secure.
I think Felicity will be here later, Felicity Hand. She also speaks with artists about how important it is for even university students to see them, hear it. So I'll leave that to her.
To Ralph and Ashwin, currently watching in Netflix and sport on television are extremely popular in South Africa and the wider world. Very few people are reading literary fiction and attending serious theatre productions. Do you believe that these art forms may die in the next couple of decades, and how can we preserve them?
The same for all the sports fans in the house, and I'm glad there's no Premier League football. I'm a great sports fan. I think sports is as important as art. I differ from almost everybody who's an artist in here today, but I really love sport. I just think far too much money is going to sport, far too much attention is going to sport. It's compared in South Africa, and particularly the sports fan nation, as what else. So people think, you know, it's all for arts and put it on sports. No, there's place for both. But bleak future. Well, we're here, lots of us. Everybody who said they'd come has come. And lots of people listening on Zoom. But it's not just me, there's so many others. You know that as well. You know, it's young people, so interested in the arts. Whether they're doing it just for fun or as a profession. Right now we're in a crisis because the Minister of Arts has not fulfilled the promises that he made. And this has led to action from artists, meaning they are passionate about what they do. And they want to be recognized, and they want to have what's due to. If they weren't, then we have a malaise. So there certainly is a lot of passion, there is a lot of interest, but there's no doubt that serious art, in my mind, so serious theatre rather than light entertainment, and literary fiction, is down. I don't want to just have a go at Netflix, because Netflix has some magnificent documentary programs as well as other narrative works as well, along with a lot of commercial garbage also. There's also nothing wrong with light entertainment, it has its place. But I think in Durban in particular, there's an open proliferation of light entertainment on the screen and the stage, less so perhaps on the page. And we need to tackle that. We need to be a little more courageous here, to put on work that challenges. And I think that this is also happening less in the wider world as well, because you know people want to consume quickly, and they want instant gratification. They want to do it on their cell phones and on their tablets. So are they going to really read a literary novel on that? Are they going to watch theatre for 70 to 90 minutes on their little cell phones? And that's also a problem the way we consume. So it is a bleak future, but let's hear Ralph first, and then we talk about perhaps what is the way forward.
Yes, I'll just reiterate kind of what you said at the beginning, that point, Ashwin, and that is, we discussed this because in our work in the community, in the mentorship programs, and things that we've done in drama, it struck me very forcefully and with great pleasure that the keenness that I knew when I was growing up and when I was longing to be an actor, trying to persuade my parents that I should be an actor, that I shouldn't necessarily go work for a bank, even though it meant I probably would never make money, etc., etc. I was lucky enough to be able to persuade them, and so that was all right. But that degree of excitement and having to do it, and longing to do it, longing for the stage, the platform, the atmosphere, the play, the smell of the priest make, the roar of the crowd, etc. That the greenest, least exposed young people in the community who we came across and who attended our classes and our courses and things had an identical burning passion to do the job. So there's no lack of that. I think what has happened somewhere along the line, and it's something to do with that. I've always maintained that it's really not the quality of our performers and our productions and our managements is the problem in this country. In many ways, it's the quality of the audiences. Okay? They don't mean size and numbers and all that, but just their kind of attitude to going to the theatre and what they bring to a performance. Now, given that the theatre is there to remind us that we're not alone, we're all sharing space, experience with the artists who are performing, also sharing an experience with one another. That, I think, if that can be strongly engendered, or consciously engendered, I can't help feeling that the quality of the audience will improve, and that in turn will inform the quality of the work that we do. Because as long as the quality is not up to scratch, you cannot, in this day and age, sustain a kind of suspension of disbelief, which is the big thing for young people. You know, they're going to go there, and in order to sustain their suspension of disbelief, they've got to believe, or they've got to buy into the idea that I've just shot Shanita there with my pistol, which has fallen off the chair. Okay, we might have a little blood sac and then make it look as realistic as possible. Unless they can buy into it, it's part of the process. They'll rather watch Netflix because there they can see all the computer-generated effects. So somehow we've got to create an experience for them that is particularly rich, much richer than it used to be. I think sometimes we fall short of that. I think we take shortcuts in the theatre, and that now, because we're a bit disappointed, we're reluctant to go and to really take the project by the ears and shake it up and give the audience the best possible experience. So I would say, just to sum up, that we want to improve the quality of the audience, and in order to do that, we have to improve the quality of our productions, of our production values, of our actors, and of the whole shoot. So that's the question.
Well, I think we need committed, passionate teachers to drive this, and I'm happy to say there are plenty of them in this audience today. And I've met many of them, and they are really good. And perhaps they're not less quite the passionate students that we might have known in our time, but they'll bring that back again, I'm sure. But they're very committed people with great vision. And then, of course, we have to do what MicroMega and African Sun Media and what Kieran spoke about, build a reading culture. So things like the book fair and things like the and to experience the theatre, go backstage, speak to artists and residents when you don't have, of course, but if they did, or get directors and actors to come to talk to them, do more workshops with writers. All these things, there's nothing new. We've all said this a million times. If that is done effectively, and there is interdisciplinary cooperation and interinstitutional cooperation, then we certainly can build a reading culture, we can build a theatre culture, and there will definitely not be a complete death of literary fiction and theatre.
But apart from education, what can the general public do to survive the arts and to empower the arts?
I think I'll touch on that. I mean, how do you get people more interested? I know I can say this, to put it simply. When I've had audiences come to my shows, including some of the very serious ones that we've been in, for example, Lecture House, they haven't left thinking, oh, geez, that's boring. When you told me about it, we've had discussions with students in the university and schools. When they come to see a production of Macbeth, the Playhouse, or the Market Theatre, you think, oh, the Shakespeare guy is so boring. And that was really over my head. They're excited. I've seen them run to the bus, the school bus, to tell their teacher what they just experienced. It's very seldom that people actually come into a theatre and leave totally bored. It's very seldom that people pick up a book. This is a problem. Then they read it and then they find, this is utterly boring. I don't want another page. In fact, in the end, I was a bit disappointed that I found page 59 to 102 boring. Of course, you should be critical always, but they don't think this is utterly worthless. So I think, and of course, some people do, but I'm saying a lot of people don't. I'm not sure, though, that we're targeting them effectively with marketing campaigns. And I'm not sure that we build an effective enough and a close enough relationship with them as artists to make them want to come back to see theatre again or to read more literary fiction. That's what we need.
So I'm looking forward to teaching this novel and having studied in our South African and global institutions, as this is a bearer and marker of marginal identity, the post-colonial South African era. Thank you.
get up the audience. So we're hungry. Our audience is actually extremely amazing. So are there any questions for our panel? Just try to talk as loudly as you can. Okay, you're far away from us.
I have a question for Ashwin. As a younger generation in South Africa, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we face? And when I mean the younger generation, I mean from 18 to 30, where you are tasked with making such big decisions, such as what career path you're going to take, what you're going to do with your life. And when you identify that challenge, how do you think that we should overcome it so that we become more productive, not just for us or for our family, but for society to change it for the better? So please tell me what you think is the challenge, what tools that we should use to overcome it, and so that we can be productive.
It's a question that extends beyond perhaps the scope of our discussion. But do you mean specifically in the arts, or you mean whatever career path you follow?
Yes, because as an author, you deal with the issues when you write. So you obviously come across certain issues that transcend careers, but we face as South Africans, as you are all South Africans.
I think people need to learn to dream again, as they once did, perhaps. They're not encouraged to dream to be something they really want to be. And people need to learn to play more so that they can experiment rather than follow a very rigid academic path or try to please their parents by getting into a cushy job. Having said all that, I recognize the economic challenges of the situation. I recognize there are not many opportunities in the arts. But if I may use examples of some of us, including your sister, who's gone the route of art. My main sister is on stage, that we perseverance with the right support network, with a little bit of daring do, you can be successful in a particular field. You're in the legal field, which is what I come from as well, and that of course is challenges also. How do you get articles? How do you get a proper job and still make a difference? It can be done in a variety of ways. Do you want to be a commercial lawyer who's sitting in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange making lots of money? Do you want to take risk of being a human rights lawyer and recognize that you earn a living perhaps, but you will not drive a fancy BMW? Some of it lies within your own context and where you come from and what you want from life. But I think we do need to encourage people to dream and to play. And then our whole school system in that regard needs to be restructured so that they can investigate what suits them best. I forgot his name, but the head of the Chopra Institute, Deepak Chopra's Institute, said once, as a good example, there was a parent who came to him and the child was struggling with maths. And the parent, and he was very successful as an artist, a brilliant visual artist. So he came to him and said, my child needs a maths tutor, can you recommend it? He said, no, I want to recommend an arts tutor. Doesn't need a maths tutor. When he grows up, he can get an accountant to help him with his books. It's basic math. What his skill is in visual art. Encourage that. Get him a visual arts tutor because that will make him something he really wants to be and make him have meaning in the world and make more meaning for others. So I think that's kind of like, this question is a complex one and will take us all day to. I hope I like just that little 5 cents.
Are there any more questions? Yes, you have.
Just a comment that we hope we can listen. Actually, congratulations on the excellent piece. That's the whole aspect of the extended family concept that you spoken about. For me, literature, a piece of writing, not for literature, unless it has some value for us as a society. Not just the reader, but through the reader to write community. In the era in which you made the story, the extended family concept was a coping mechanism for many of us. And I think you look currently, there's this context of black tax that's going around with as a so-called, sometimes negative connotation, in the sense that I am my brother's keeper, I am my cousin's keeper, etc. So the comment I would make is that I think it's a catalyst for investigation into that concept. So once a good thing, now has a negative connotation. But in the context of, for example, the pandemic that we have, and the hard economic time that we have, the relevance of the story to get people to reflect and self-reflect. So my question to you is that, do you yourself as a writer see the relevance of the story in the 21st century?
Yeah, I certainly do. I, to some degree, lived in an extended family for the large part of my life, really. And I saw the complexities and contradictions that Derosha described of that. But in the end, there was a lot of come around me and took care of it. And of course, that is clearly the case, not just in the so-called Indian community, but in the mixed race communities, in the African communities, various African communities, and also in the Afrikaans-speaking white community, often live in an extended family. So I believe it is totally relevant because it exists and it poses challenges to us, but it's also a way of life for us in South Africa, and one that should regularly be interrogated to celebrate its the qualities of it, but also to recognize the shortcomings, the flaws of it, because culture constantly evolves. So we should, yes, acknowledge it and then interrogate it, and not be ashamed of it in any way, but at the same time, I think, as we go forward, we will recognize that some of the cultural aspects that we haven't confronted need to be confronted, and will shape our future if we confront it honestly.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you for the excellent questions as well. I will release them from their duties here. And congratulations to Ashwin, officially shooting has been on. Thanks, Singh, for taking this opportunity to launch the book, publish the book rather, because it's quite an ominous task to take on this kind of responsibility. We're very grateful. Thanks so much. So part one is concluded. We're now going to obviously go into part two, and as I mentioned earlier, Durban Dialogues Dissected, an analysis of Ashwin Singh's plays, is a volume of critical essays of Ashwin's 8 published plays. These plays are published in 2 anthologies, Durban Dialogues Indian Voice and Durban Dialogues Then and Now by London-based Aurora Metro Books. The anthologies have been studied and were referenced at a variety of universities in South Africa, Mauritius, India, Canada, and Europe. Some of these plays have also been published in collective anthologies, New South African Plays by Aurora Metro Books, and the Catalina Collection by Catalina Limited Theatre Company. Ashwin's play, Ryoga Light, has been translated into Gujarati by Professor Pranav Joshipura, who is also one of the contributors in Durban Dialogues Dissected, and his play, The House, has been translated into Catalan by Professor Nuria Casado. Altogether, Ashwin has written 11 plays and 4 sketch comedy shows, including his brand new play, Freeform. 5 of these 15 works are collaborative efforts. Singh Siblings, I should mention I'm the other half of the Singh Siblings, I forgot to actually tell you that I'm Shantal Singh, has been producing in theatre since 2001, so it's 20 years in business this year. Our theatre productions have traveled throughout South Africa as well as to India and the UK. In 2019, we noted that there were academics writing about Ashwin's works and presenting papers about his plays at seminars and conferences in South Africa and abroad. We are connected with some of these academics and found them to be both rooted public intellectuals and fine human beings. Ashwin asked them if they wanted to contribute to a book of essays on his body of work, and they were happy to do so. African Sun Media agreed to publish the double-blind peer-reviewed book. So we will be hearing more about this book shortly, but let us commence part 2 with a few excerpts of Ashwin's best-known theatre production at the Durban Fair. I hand you over.
Sanjay, listen, man, you left some chili bites behind. You want, maybe, they're coming! Maybe you can pick it up later? Huh? Yeah, well, come on, relax. Nobody's going to come here. What a big deal. You're a businessman, I'm a businessman. Well, come in. I'm not in the mood right now. Are you alone? Yeah. Do you think you show more respect to your future boss? Who are you? Must have been the garden. Trying to get out of the door. What can I do for you? What's wrong, my man? What? No tea? Biscuits? This was an Indian house. They come in a tray of biscuits, samosas, and the paratis too. You only got only water. No, you're not. Oh, there's still a lovely recliner. How many places you have here? Very homely. Thanks. So, how's business? Very good. The new factory will be cooked in the next week. Will be ready to go the next month. It's good. Yeah. Yeah. The other day I caught up with an old family friend, Selvan Naidoo. He also got retrenched recently. You know, he's also a good candidate to manage my factory. What? I'm just saying, I didn't know it was available until I bumped into it. He's well organized, very experienced, he's a family friend. You said I'd be the perfect candidate for the job. Last week on the phone, you said it again. I still give you the edge over here. I'm just saying, you know, maybe I need to put you on probation. Probation? Hey, I'm a good businessman. Isn't that great to know I've got you the property last year? I've got 20 years experience. Selvan has more, plus degrees in management. You just have a big one. You want me to sell myself to you? Is that what you want? I'm a businessman. I'm not a charity for retrenched whites. So that's what this is now, huh? Indian thing. Whatever. Indian brother, good business knows no color. Then what's the problem? You want me to struggle your ego? And you are a great entrepreneur, you know you're a victim of the public. Such a thing. I mean, how many people want to employ a 48-year-old entrenched white man? Okay, that's why. Come all the way here. 2 hours to tell me how hopeless my situation is. I can see my niece. Yes. I made more progress than you. Leave him. Show him what he's really like. That doesn't matter. The point is, you told me a month ago that your niece was sorted out and you were going ahead, but you've done nothing. You got to work here, it's poison the mind against me. Filthy black man, treated me like shit, you assaulted me. Assaulted you? Look, you wanted to leave this place and to lose his power. I want to say, so what are you going to do? I told you in a couple of weeks. I bullshit, man. You know what you're doing? Just playing games. Your niece is probably keeping you for alive. Listen! It's a delicate matter. You can't handle like that. Well, you probably don't have the force. I'm giving you 1 week to start making things happen. Otherwise, I'll be contacting Selvan. You give me an ultimatum? Hey, tell me, dear, is this how you do your business? Is this how you make your money? You get your managers to do the dirty work. Let me say it simply, Jason. If you don't do something in the next week, then you don't deserve to be manager of my factory.
Johnny Naidoo. I've got now new family. Uncle Johnny. The man of many guises. Teacher, advisor, political activist, butcher shop. He was the one who inspired me to become a teacher. You'll never feel more complete than the moment you see that spark in a child's eyes. And you know it wasn't the media, the internet, or even the child's parents who stimulated that magic. It was you, your ideas, your compassion, your little nudge. Be a teacher, my boy. Start another fire. Then there was Uncle Johnny, the mutton man. No, Auntie, I think you're mistaken. If there's one thing I know better than poetry, it's meat. And when I say you mutton, it's mutton, not lamb, not goat. Must be the masala you're using. See, I'll come Saturday afternoon, I'll cook you a nice hot mutton curry on the open fire, then you'll make the cheese down. In the meantime, there's a cut and clean running fowl for free. Ask the ladies about our fresh chicken. And of course, all the ladies would shout their approval. For them, Uncle Johnny could do no wrong. They were charmed by his wit and grace, as was I. The only time I didn't want to be around Uncle Johnny was when he bragged about his days as a sportsman. Hey, you name the game, I played it. Football, tennis, cricket, gulli-danda. I used to play high jump too. I jumped over my mother's clothes leg. Yeah, when long jump too, one day I jumped from our house to my neighbor's yard and on top of it, found a tree. Nobody could catch me then. But there were no opportunities for Indians in those days, huh? And you'll be reading about my great feats. There was one side no one knew about. A side that I was only to discover in the first years of the new millennium. Uncle Johnny the romantic. Now, romantic gestures weren't exactly put on public display in Ryoka. I mean, we were a small Indian town. But a few years after his wife passed away, I noticed Uncle Johnny displaying some extra charm whenever the widow, Auntie Mina, visited the butcher shop. Hey, thanks for the support, Mina! No, the money's correct. I'll give you half a kilo for free. I know how much you like my coffee. Hey, Mina, the other day I bought some nice sardines at a good price. And my daughter-in-law and son-in-law are going away for the weekend. And Bobby said he can't make it because he got another family function. It's a pretty nice sardines. Too much for me to eat alone. You got any weddings, funerals, birthday parties you going to this weekend? But the learned Uncle Johnny could never get around to making an unequivocal invitation. So one day when he invited me for a secret cigar at our hut, hey, I had to get out of the house, man. Things are getting unbearable with my daughter-in-law's new rules. Hey, especially on Tuesdays and Thursdays when she goes temple. Then she gets overhyped, like she got trance. No, man, I can't leave that woman for long. No. Hey, leave your shoes outside before you enter the lounge. Don't watch football after 8 p.m. Only walk the dog on Saturday mornings. Don't wash the dishes. Your method is wrong. Hey, I'd rather run away here and smoke my cigar in peace. I mean, I'm a prisoner in the house I built. I should have never signed the house over to them after my wife passed away. That's when all this nonsense started. As for my son, he's a big potter. So Uncle Johnny and I spent every Tuesday and Thursday evenings in the house to eat some pizza and smoke a few cigars. And he'd tell me stories about incidents that happened at the shop, about his adventures with Uncle Bobby, and about a world he thought was now fading. Hey, Sunil, you must spend some time with Uncle Bobby. Hey, that old uncle got energy, huh? And he's a naughty body too. Hey, he used to like to sit on the shop veranda and watch the aunties. Hey, the one time he just had a hard fight last night, and he heard Auntie Selvy's sexy voice. In a few seconds, he went from comatose to pantyhose. Yeah, hey, but the auntie stared and gave him one look, man, and his heart slowed down very quickly. Hey, but even he can't beat this other uncle. No, Mr. Arjun. Hey, our sisters came to visit one weekend, They ended up staying for good, man. People say they like extra artists, uncle. Yeah, you know, we call the crew Ma, and we call the younger sister kitchen Ma, because 24 hours she's in the kitchen. And we call her younger sister sitting room Ma, because all day she sits and beats the needles. Uncle Johnny, it looks like Mr. Auntie wants an auntie for every room in the house. Uncle Johnny, what happened to those monthly community gatherings we used to have? I remember going to them as a little boy. It was so cool. You used to have lamb splits and play chutney music. Everyone used to come. Yeah, I don't know why we stopped all that. Huh? I suppose the young generation doesn't care as much. And you know, a lot of things are changing in the new millennium. Shops not doing as well as before, and you know the Hindu scriptures say it's a bad time now. Kalyug, they call it. You know, when the children turn against their parents, a lot of cultures predict this is a bad time. Bad time or not, romantic love always finds its way to reveal itself to the world. And so one day, Uncle Johnny and I were interrupted by the laughter of a young couple, Jason and Jason. Hey! Stop this kissing now! What do I think this is a motel? Hey, Jason, I know you're a naughty boy, but Jason, I'm surprised at you. No, Uncle Johnny. Hey. It was just an innocent kiss where, no, I just needed a place to talk to Jason and so I can beat him up. Our parents don't want us to be together. No, not because I'm colored and she's Indian. It's because I'm Christian and she's Hindu. Yeah, you know, our father said that if he catches me with his water again, he'll chop off my limbs and screw my legs to my shoulders and my arms to my ass. I mean, look at me, Uncle Johnny. Does it look like I've been walking my hands? Hey, shut up, boy. You talk too much. Let me see your book. Not bad. Couple of grammatical errors. And your spelling's influenced by American culture. But your words and your thoughts are beautiful. Hey, Jay-Z, you love this book. Now I can see where you're looking. It was very detailed. Right. Sunil and I are going to walk. You can sit here in the hut and talk. When we come back in 15 minutes, you must be gone.
Look at all of them. Hoping the next bull will fill the train. Next car will win the day. White, Indian, some black men, few colored ladies, young, middle-aged, old, tall, short, fat, thin, large, white, men, women, all equal young. Culture conflicts, put on hold. Politics of the country, forgotten for now. Miss Maharaj, just get away from me. I have nothing further to say to you. I indulged you last Saturday. Go talk to someone else today. Go talk to Helen. She'll have lots of juicy stuff you can put in your newspaper. Hey, Helen, I'm sending over a local journalist to interview you about why so many old people are spending their weekends gambling. Give us the details, right? Let's do lunch afterwards. Thank you, my friend. Helen, knock her over. I think I know exactly what she did. So, my dear, you want to know what I'm doing at the casino on Saturday morning? Well, my dear, I'm having fun. A lot more fun than I would be having powers at home, listening to my daughter Elise's incessant complaints about why Mr. Singh hadn't given her a good platform at Lawson today, or why I wasn't taking the more active therapy, and why I stopped jogging with Granny Simpson in the mornings, and when I stopped throwing myself with Mr. Cohen after all, he's a Jew, and then my lovely son-in-law Tom reminded me of that wonderful home to the aged he had found last month, and would I not be happy again? Then I hear the sounds of the machines calling me. Come and play, Helen. I have some simple fun. I don't need to be like that, little girl. I don't need your sympathy. This is the happiest day. And now, I suggest you find yours. Okay. Here we go. Off she goes. Helen must have told her what she didn't want here and sent her. I mean, she deserves asking me so many questions so she can write one shallow article in the newspaper. The first thing she asked me was, so, Auntie, where did you get the money to gamble from, like, every day of your life? I told her straight, I use my pension money. I don't think you know about me, Gully. What do you think? I was a bored housewife. Then my husband passed away and I became a lonely old woman. Well, let me tell you, I had a meaningful job for the most part of my life. I was a receptionist, then PA, then communications officer for the same company. I only stopped working when I was 50. I know about independence. I'm not asking for handouts, and I'm not burdening anyone. I've got friends. We go to the park, we go to the movies, and we meet here. And I don't cry myself to sleep at night. You don't know about me, girl. Okay, I've left you about the time when we go to the park. This is the way we meet. Anyway, next thing she asked me was, but how can you go on gambling week in and week out? Don't you get bored? Bored? Good Lord! When Saturday morning comes, I feel the way I felt the first time my late husband Ramesh took me to Coconut Grove. I get that shivering sensation. And it's not because I forgot to put my shorts over my scarf. Hey, Parvati! What is it, morning? Oh, I see now. She's with her daughter. Didn't visit for long, so she came to take her out for lunch. You're not fooling anyone, Parvati. She knows you're a gambler. Six years now since he passed away. But I still miss him. We used to have so much fun. And he was just starting to get into gambling before he died. Hypothetically, and she said, you know, killing your Saturdays, you're at the casino. I mean, you're an Indian granny. I was pissed off. Is that what I am? An Indian granny? And what is an Indian granny? Someone who waltzes around all day, happily doing the household chores, who waits on her loving grandchildren, who don't pinch her, pull her, punch her. One who wears a sari and attends all family weddings and the temple, whether she likes it or not, and then quietly watches a Bollywood TV on Saturday. Well, let me tell you, Miss Maharaj, 2 Saturdays ago, I didn't come to the casino. I stayed at home because we were expecting relatives from Peter Maxwell to visit us. Had to put on a show of solidarity. Mondays to Fridays, we get on with our separate lives. I help my son and daughter-in-law to clean, take care of the kids. They go to their jobs. I work in the garden. They come home, eat in the dining room. I eat in my bedroom, watch a show on my portable TV and go to bed. We hardly sleep. Saturday morning, we all to hug and kiss our relatives, act like a happy family. Next morning, my son gave me 2. Thank you, Mom. Here's some money. Okay, casino. What a farce. I won't play that game. I'll wear a sari when I want to wear a sari. And sometimes I'll wear a skirt. I'll go to temple when I feel the call to go. And I won't attend every family wedding. I will no longer slave for my children. And I'll come to the casino whenever I want to come to the casino. I'm not your Indian granny.
Obviously, some of the things are analyzed in just mention that all royalties received from the sale of Durban Dialogues Dissected were related to STAN Foundation, which stands for Sustaining Theatre and Dance in South Africa. Ashwin is a patron of the organization. To tell us more about this crucially important organization, we are honored to have with us a member of the National Steering Committee, Dr. Ismail Mahomed. Ismail is a playwright, an arts manager, and an activist. He is the former artistic director of the National Arts Festival and current director of the Center for Creative Arts. Please welcome Dr. Ismail Mahomed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the invitation to be at this launch this afternoon and to enjoy that really engaging and stimulating dialogue that happened between yourselves a short while ago. But before I get down to telling you about the STAN Foundation, I probably just like to share some of my own thoughts as well. And I must say that having arrived in Durban in November last year, I have been highly impressed and moved by the amount of work that happens to promote the literary word in the city. And special thanks to Dr. Naidoo for the work that he does passionately. I haven't seen a more active WhatsApp group amongst writers than what I experience with the WhatsApp group that he runs together with writers, fans, and enthusiasts for literature in the city. Now, the question I have is, why would anyone who lives in a city like Durban, with its splendid weather and pristine beaches, choose to sit behind a computer and write instead of spending time chilling on the beach? Where does one find the source for inspiration to tell the stories that one does? How do we ensure that we're able to reflect critically on our past, analyze our present time, and make sense of our present times so that we're able to better envision the kind of future we want? I would never be able to understand why Ashwin Singh would not want to be sitting on the beach in Durban. But I'm indeed grateful that he chooses to sit in front of his computer desk to churn out words that form sentences, sentences that form paragraphs, paragraphs that form chapters, and chapters which finally form a book. Likewise, I'm grateful that he chooses to imagine characters, their lives, their biographies, and how it intersects with each other, and the biographies intersect with each other to form memorable plays. Ashwin's versatility as a playwright and as a novelist is a remarkable talent. It allows him to straddle from one genre to the other genre. But more remarkable is his ability to tell stories in different genres, his astute eye of being able to draw characters in his writing that one would find in our everyday suburbs. Now, the telling of Indian narratives is no easy task, because as much as the media would want us to believe, there isn't an Indian prototype character in South Africa. We who are fifth or sixth generation South Africans have such an incredibly complex identity. We have carried the richness of generational history, culture, and religion from our parents and our grandparents. We've been part of the liberation struggle against apartheid. We are part of a generation of Indians that pride ourselves, and some of us were amongst Nelson Mandela's cabinet that ushered in a new South Africa. But coupled with all of the positive identity that we celebrate, we also have to deal with the fact that amongst us, there were those that sold us out during the apartheid struggle. There are still some of them who continue to betray the Madiba ideal, and there are some who just remain totally disengaged and comfortable in their cocoons. Writing a play or a novel is really the art of being able to weave oneself between all these complex characters and to imagine the kind of situation that will arise when these characters collide with each other. In Ashwin Singh's writing, he gives us glimpses of satire and poignancy. Ashwin does, however, not leave his characters struggling in the little Indian ghettos. He even goes as far as imagining what can arise when his Indian characters collide with characters from other South African communities. In very significant ways, he breaks down the barriers and the walls which apartheid had erected, and he puts in its place doorways and windows through which people can reach out to each other, understand each other, and get a better view of each other. Swiss novelist Bernard Kement stated that for him, writing is a stubborn regaining of the past, an attempt to engrave time somewhere. The South African writer Don Matera puts it even more powerfully when he talks about writing, which, when recalling our past, he simply tries to make sense of our present time. Don Matera simply says, memory is the weapon. A weapon against what, you may ask? I do not have the answer to that question. I depend on the imagination of poets, of novelists, of playwrights like Ashwin Singh to lead me to the moments when I can cherish the power of memories. The Polish writer Nirode Bramdaw states that as a novelist, he fights daily against a battle of memories and also against time. But then he goes on to claim that as a novelist, the most important memories are those that he can make up. Plays and novels are essentially the treasure chests in which we collect our memories. Writers take us to places that we have both experienced and imagined. It is these tensions that they create between our experiences and our imaginations that makes us hold on to their words, to believe in their characters, and to be entranced by their plot and their turns. Ashwin Singh's writing is more than just a memoir of characters, cultures, and places that he has experienced. It is also a melting pot of our collective imaginations. It is in these areas where we grapple with what we already know and what we are about to discover that we feel inspired to keep turning the pages. It is for this reason that we remain thankful that Ashwin Singh can sacrifice sitting on the beach, but instead choose to turn out thoughts that become words, words that become sentences, sentences that become paragraphs, and paragraphs that become chapters, and ultimately become a novel or a play. I extend our congratulations as a Stand Foundation to Ashwin Singh on the launch of his books. And I also bring the good wishes from the Stand Foundation, which was established in April last year to support playwrights, actors, and other workers at a time when the sector has almost been decimated by the national lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic. Ashwin Singh is a patron of the Stand Foundation. What that simply means is that he has been one of the people who has contributed financially to the launch of the Stand Foundation at a time when most actors in our country are without any earnings. We remain thankful that he not only has chosen to write, but he has also chosen to channel some funds from his writing to sustain artists who have become disadvantaged by government's poor strategy to render effective relief to artists. Over the past 27 days, we have witnessed how artists in Johannesburg have occupied the offices of the National Arts Council, demanding answers to the Department of Arts and Sports, Arts and Culture's mismanagement of funds from the President's economic stimulus plan. At a time when government is failing the arts, I call on all of us to find ways to buy books, support poets, listen to local music, and return to our theatres, so that those whose livelihoods these to capture our memories and our lives for future generations continue to be supported, so they can be the word bearers of our memories and the truth that we continue to seek. The Stand Foundation is only one amongst many organizations in South Africa that at this particular time of crisis in the arts sector is attempting to ensure that those who keep our memories alive through their writing, through their poetry, through their music, through their dance, can continue to sustain themselves. I thank Ashwin Singh for being one of the light bearers in that movement. Thank you very much.
thank you, Ismail, for that really inspiring talk as well. I think the important thing to understand for me is that it's artists helping artists. I think too often we always start to see these things as begging balls, going government and artists funds and do these things, but it doesn't discount the fact that you can also get involved and find out more about STAN, make contributions as well. Every time you purchase a ticket as well, you're making a contribution to keeping art alive. So please remember that, support art, buy books, engage in art yourself, create those sculptures. There's all kinds of ways to contribute to the arts. And like was mentioned in the panel discussion before this as well, we need to keep the arts alive. It needs to not be absent in our lives. We are now honored to welcome the editor of Durban Dialogues Dissected, Dr. Felicity Hand. Felicity is a senior lecturer in the English department at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. She is also the head of the research group Ratnakara, which explores the literatures and cultures of the southwestern Indian Ocean. Felicity is published extensively and is also editor of the book Relations and Networks in South African Indian Writing. That book featured an essay on Ashwin's play, The House, by Dr. Hawkins Rose, was also contributed to essays to Durban Dialogues Dissected. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 restrictions, Felicity couldn't come to Durban. She's obviously based in Spain. However, we have recorded a Zoom presentation and will now play that on screen. Please forgive the brightness of the picture in the second half of her presentation. The sun was particularly powerful at that evening in Barcelona. So here is Dr. Felicity Hand.
Delighted to be here, if not physically, at least in spirit. The launch of Durban Dialogues Dissected is the end result of a long but rewarding project that started up over 2 years ago. When Ashwin asked me if I would edit the book, I was both very, very touched and deeply honoured. And I must say it has been a wonderful learning process for me. I'm extremely grateful to all the authors who have contributed to the volume for their patience and willingness to make all the changes I kept on requesting. The end result is, I believe, an excellent piece of research and a tribute to the work of Ashwin Singh. Durban Dialogues Dissected is a book that was long overdue. Ashwin has 8 plays to his credit, plus many other pieces of creative writing, including, of course, the novel, which is also being launched today. A playwright with 8 plays deserves to have critical studies on his work, a gap which this volume has succeeded in filling. I first made Ashwin's acquaintance via email, how else, over 3 years ago, and since then we have been in regular contact. A highlight of one of my trips to Durban was watching a brilliant performance of his 2017 play, Into the Grey, in which he acted. To be honest, I hadn't incorporated much drama into my courses on post-colonial writing before meeting Ashwin. But editing this volume has widened my own personal horizon enormously, and now I always include at least one play among the set texts I teach. The problem with teaching plays in a non-English speaking environment like mine is the difficulty in getting the students to see a performance, which to me is vital. The written script works fine, but to see the play on stage makes it come alive. And also in our situation, getting the students to hear different accents, different Englishes is bonus. So having some of the performances now available on YouTube is a godsend. This volume aims to insert Ashwin Singh's oeuvre into the post-colonial canon of drama. But I'd just like to make a few comments on the absence of drama in far too much post-colonial criticism and in far too many university post-colonial syllabi. Gilbert and Tompkins, in their study on post-colonial drama, note that most post-colonial criticism overlooks drama, and they suggest it's perhaps because it seems to be a sort of impure form. I mean, play script and performance is therefore difficult to document. This may be true, as many of the plays, for example, during the Black Consciousness movement, underwent various rewritings during performances before the final print publication. But dramatic and performance theories have a lot to offer post-colonial debates about language, about interpolation, about subject formation, about representation, and of course, forms of resistance. The difficulty, if not impossibility, of audiences even national audiences, let alone foreign drama enthusiasts, of actually viewing a live performance of contemporary drama need not and should not prevent the study and criticism of this highly immediate and provocative genre. Post-colonial theatre critics tend to focus on what Femi Elba argues is an excessive interest in oppression and resistance, which, according to him, has sort of obfuscated other developments of political theatre in Africa. This is, of course, a valid argument, as theatre, in our case, of course, South African theatre, tends to be neglected in most post-colonial criticism, as Gilbert and Tompkins point out. The question is whether we should be analysing South African literature, and more specifically South African and Indian theatre, under the umbrella term of post-colonial writing. Lauren Kruger claims that the term post-colonial, and the sovereign state it presumably denotes, has yet to gain the currency in South Africa that it enjoys in metropolitan academic circles. Certainly, persisting class and ethnic inequalities suggest the truth of this statement. But if we define the post-colonial moment as the demise of discriminatory racial laws and the achievement of universal franchise, then post-1994 South Africa has indeed entered the post-colonial stage. So why has South African post-colonial drama not received that much critical attention? To my mind, the problem resides not only in the discrepancies between the published text and the performance, but perhaps other issues which, perhaps are even more far-reaching. I mean, students around the world study Shakespeare's plays without ever having seen a live performance of his works. But I wonder how many university or even secondary school teachers would be happy to include a contemporary play in their syllabi if they know that the students are not going to be able to see an acted performance of the drama in question. Obviously, factors surrounding the canon enter into this dilemma. But we need to see performance as a tool of resistance to the inequalities of the status quo. Drama is an immediate and critical social self-introspection. But sadly, other questions come into it, economic questions of viability and the need for what actor and director Peter Hayes calls a commercial edge enter into the choice. So what does this mean? That thought-provoking plays are like literary novels, no longer on the popular agenda? But our aim as critics is to vindicate the importance of serious drama, if by serious we mean plays that question our prejudices, our comfortable middle-class positions, and our stereotypical visions of the other. So I see that our duty as university lecturers is to promote this kind of drama, whether or not our students can attend a performance of the play, as drama is and will always be a reflection of our reality. Despite the move to die hard, the first 2 decades of a democratic South Africa may have rendered protest theatre somewhat obsolete, but a firm belief in a creolized community where the sharing of a common space leads to an intermingling of cultures, languages, and customs without any hierarchical ranking still seems to be in the making. And I claim that the plays of Ashwin Singh celebrate this creolization as his characters strive to come to terms with the post-apartheid situation, which acknowledges or should acknowledge the contribution of cultures from the other ethnic groups in the so-called new South Africa. In this volume, we celebrate the work of South African Indian playwright Ashwin Singh, which through its diversity of characters from all ethnic backgrounds goes beyond the former resistance plays and forges a more inclusive South African identity. This does not mean to say that his plays cover up the race and class inequalities that still plague the nation. On the contrary, Singh's work is an attempt to bring these blatant prejudices and social ills to the forefront, as only by confronting unpleasant realities can any far-reaching changes ever take place. Singh admirably fills in what Gilbert and Tompkins have called the gap in post-colonial studies, as his plays provide a sweeping overview of the trials and tribulations of the newly inaugurated post-apartheid, therefore post-colonial state. One of the many projects of post-coloniality is to review and rewrite past histories in order to present alternative viewpoints, but also to reject any sense of the marginalized or colonized as having some sort of inherent purity, as opposed to the innate villainy of the colonizing white minority. Non-binary thinking is essential in any post-colonial reassessment of the past, and Singh's plays avoid falling into this sort of, binary trap. His works encompass a myriad of current situations and social issues, and he's careful to measure out dramatic moments with snatches of humor, so the audience, or reader, can fully empathize with the characters. So if we look at the book which we're now launching, it's organized in 3 acts. This is because it's a book about drama, so it's in 3 acts. Following the introduction, there's a brief biography of the playwright and a list of his works. Act 1 concludes with an interview with the playwright, which highlights his concerns with the future of contemporary South African theatre, which is witnessing rapidly diminishing theatre audiences. Despite competition from television, Netflix and the like, Singh claims that like other well-known foreign playwrights who use humour in their work, comedy with substance, and I'm quoting him now, comedy with substance can be effectively used to heal some of the country's unfinished business. So I think the unfinished business is very significant. So therefore, it's clear that he believes that theatre has a role as a vehicle for social change. Act 2 contains 6 essays by leading academics and cultural practitioners. Betty Govindan inscribed Singh's oeuvre within the traditions of South African literature and drama in her chapter entitled The Cartography of Struggle in South African Theatre, with particular reference to Ryoka Light by Ashwin Singh. So she emphasizes how South African plays, and Ashwin Singh's are no exception, are, and I'm quoting her, are impelled by a robust political will to overcome apartheid and strong impulses to focus on the goals of common citizenship. She centers the main body of her article on Singh's one-man play, Ryoka Light, which she claims illustrates the survival tactics of the indentured laborers and their descendants. And in discussing this play, in her detailed discussion, she focuses on many of the numerous themes that this play brings to the fore, including home, identity, diaspora, and of course, spatial politics. Debra Lutke, in her chapter, Ashwin Singh, Egg or Chicken, a writer-director's recipe in interviews and analysis, seeks to unravel what she calls the chicken and egg syndrome by comparing opinions of various leading South African playwrights, including, of course, Ashwin Singh. She claims that the work of the director is as far-reaching as the playwrights, which is why she calls it the egg or chicken syndrome. Because together they forge an alliance which aims to uncover a past which can explain the meaning of our present existence. So she argues that the relationship between the two, the writer and the director, is a mutually influential one. Copeland Rose examines Ashwin Singh's play Duped from 2011. The title of his chapter is From Rockets to Robots, the Function of Science Fiction Icons in Ashwin Singh's Duped. So he talks about this being a very clever mixture of satire and science fiction, which the playwright uses in order to explore apartheid's traumatic legacy. The chapter acknowledges the playwright's refusal to think in binary terms as, it's not a simple binary between explorer and the people under assessment, because they all belong to the same nation. He concludes his chapter by stating that in true Singh fashion, there is a message, and the message is a warning call that mutual distrust and self-interest among South Africans could be used to install sinister methods of control. Shantal Singh provides a psychological perspective to Ashwin Singh's plays in her chapter, entitled Exploring Trauma in Post-Apartheid South Africa, as experienced by lead characters in Ashwin Singh's plays Shooting, Beyond the Big Bangs, and Into the Grey. So she's looking at the ability of the playwright to balance the emotion of trauma and at the same time entertain the audience. She argues that other South African playwrights have tackled this very sensitive area, but Ashwin Singh is able to go one step further because he delves into the complexities and contradictions of his characters, victims and perpetrators. She focuses on 3 of Singh's plays in her chapter, and she highlights the difficulty of achieving this equilibrium when themes of trauma are foregrounded. Pranav Joshipura's chapter, entitled Racial Conflict Presented Through the Plays of South African Indian playwright Ashwin Singh, explores the background to South African Indian theatre. This very timely contextualization of the role of South African Indian playwrights in recent history paves the way for his analysis of Singh's work. He points out that Singh's plays not only present problems the nation faces at micro level, but also looks at, poses questions to the government about how they're going to solve these issues. So he's underlining the political role of the playwright and how the playwright interpolates the audience in this task. Joshipura concludes that Ashwin Singh's plays enable readers and theatregoers to explore racial and class divisions in South Africa, as well as providing solutions, possible solutions to end them. The final chapter of Act 2 is dedicated to Singh's latest performed play, Into the Grey. This is my chapter. It's entitled Dilemmas, Disillusion and Resilience in Ashwin Singh's Into the Grey. I argue that the play has to be read as a call for resilience, as a way for more positive solutions, more positive and adaptable solutions to contemporary inequalities, and the importance to, have more positive thinking and be able to bounce back when there's, the characters go through, they make wrong choices, they become disillusioned, but there's a possibility of bouncing back. Act 3 begins with Ralph Lawson's views on the role of the director. In his chapter, A Director's Cut, staging the play, Lawson, who has collaborated with Ashwin Singh in numerous productions, reveals the dilemmas and quandaries of the theatre director. He focuses on 3 of Singh's plays, and he succeeds in enlightening audiences and readers on the crucial decisions that a theatre director must take as regards characters' psychology and motivations, but without losing sight of what he calls the playwright's pivotal idea. Lawson makes it clear what Deborah Lutzke herself suggests in her chapter, that playwright and director form this symbiosis that turns the theatrical event into a multifaceted experience. The final scene in Act 3 of this volume is Pallavi Rastogi's Afterword, How to Swing the Game of Life in South Africa, which in fact sums up many of the issues dealt with in the preceding chapters. But she focuses particularly on the play Swing, which hasn't been dealt with by any of the other contributors. Rastogi highlights Singh's essential Durban identity, which is apparent in most of his plays, but at the same time, his constant experimentation with new forms and new approaches within the genre of drama. This play, according to Rastogi, exemplifies the conflict between the coloured and the Indian communities who are unable to transcend their differences. The play switches back and forth from the apartheid days to the present through the narratives of the two characters, Samantha and her father. There's no clear-cut resolution, which is usually the case in Ashwin Singh's plays. So the viewer or reader is left wondering what the outcome will be. I mean, who's going to win this tennis match? Is it going to be Samantha, the coloured Indian, or Lerato Sibisi, the Zulu? But this is the point, of course, that South Africa will be whatever the people make it. So this volume celebrates the work of Ashwin Singh, in the words of Pallavi Rastogi, a brave new voice. And it encourages readers, theatre lovers, post-colonial specialists, and other interested scholars around the world to discover his amazing gift and enjoy learning about the realities of post-apartheid South Africa, reading his entertaining and extremely thought-provoking plays. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity, for officially launching Durban Dialogue Dissected. Special thanks as well to all the contributors in the volume for their articles, and Felicity herself for writing one of the articles as well. The event center and everyone really proud. Our final feature today is a panel discussion of Durban Dialogue Dissected, which I will facilitate. I will be joined by Ashwin and Nellie Ngcongo James. Nellie is the HOD of Arts Education at the University of Kwazulu-Natal, as well as performing artist and human rights activist. the major themes in Ashwin Singh's book as reference in Durban dialogue. Ashwin, anything you want to say? So while we've obviously got an audience here who's been quite often a novel and one of plays, some people who have actually watched plays as well. I just wondering, does this heavy theme actually take off? Racism, classism, there are not easy material to actually handle that. I'm wondering if maybe we have to do that off. How the screens line immediately, some of the lines of the volume as well, kind of the Pura, which is racism, classism, quite a bit of detail, what they were within as well, how we place certain things, particularly in the localized in her case, how we place class, how we place certain issues, and she allows certain things to kind of place in space. Do you feel that this is what playwrights should be taking on, major issues like racism and how we move forward on class?
We're past that point. You know, I think all the apartheid activists and all those playwrights really started the whole racism thing and equality with that. And now we have to move, for me, even further. Like when I was reading this book, I realized I know nothing about Indian people. I thought I did, but I know absolutely nothing about Indian people. What I've ever experienced is that when I look at my Indian friends, I'm like, oh, they're so lucky to have such a good family. They're so lucky to always have family support. But I never actually did any research to know what it's actually like and how Durban Indians experience Durban. And then move on to things when we talk about racism now, how I feel as a young Black woman that Black people can be extremely racist towards Indian and vice versa. But I'm talking because from a Black girl perspective, I mean, all of my friends and everyone who's helped me in my career is Indian. From Dr. Singh to Ashwin to everyone who's helped me. And they've never put the fact that I'm Black out there or anything like that. And I just feel like Black and Indian people are one. We have this one journey, you know what I mean? And I wish we could just open it up and not have all these things that we talk about politics. Make us think different, one's better than the other. And it really upsets me.
But I think it's actually a very important point because this country has for a long time known about projects like that. But Ashwin's work is actually set in post-conflict. We are still having these conversations. It almost feels like I've mentioned before, we haven't had a name. We don't really know each other. So we recreate these cultural stereotypes instead of really unfolding on our archetypes or nuances.
And what's interesting to me is when you say Ashwin, that you identify as a Black person. And it's one of the first time I've heard a person say that. And could you elaborate, like, what do you mean when you say yourself as a Black person?
Well, firstly, let me say, I think almost everybody here would say they identify as a Black person as well, because I know most of them very well. And they say it because they identify with the struggle against apartheid and against colonialism and imperialism. That's the political meaning of Black. We stand together as oppressed peoples to fight against the common oppressor. And that we want to empower each other as one people. We may have different nuances and cultures because of heritage and because of origin, but we are a conglomerate of people who are happy to work together to recognize that we have one destiny here in South Africa. And so it's not just me who says that, I think there are many others who say it, but there's also the absence of that in many countries as well, including the Indian community. There are many people who would not say that, they would say they are Indian. And that's disappointing. So I'm just trying to explain my context of where I got the term Black from. But it's this thing about it. I mean, you know, the book deals with this, and you've raised it as well. We don't have just one identity. I mean, there are many identities. I'm a human being. I'm a child of the universe. I'm Black as well. I'm South African. I'm African. But I'm also influenced by seers who lived in India 3,000 years ago, whose philosophies essentially drive my thinking. But of course, like here as well, nutritional belief and ancestors. Africans. And that was influenced by Christianity and Islam as well, different religions, and all the subcultures that exist in these different communities as well. So this is the thing about this. We make more point about racism and classism and identity politics. The common theme we've been dealing with it for a minute. But what we need to do, and I hope in some small ways my work achieves this, is to get to know each other better as individuals and recognize our common humanity, but also our differences, and deal with those differences way beyond the stereotype. I'm surprised in a way, and I'd like to put this back at you then, that you say that you didn't really think you knew much about Indian people actually now reading the book. But yet you have been so close to so many Indian people in your working life. So why would you say?
I think it's different. It's more in an academic space. We all focus on our own disciplines. I don't get to know the people, who they are, how they are, their daily struggles, their daily troubles. You just see that. Good morning, how are you? Let's write an article together, but we don't really get in depth with who we are and how we are experiencing the space. So that's what it's been. What I've seen from the Indian community is a huge sense of kindness. And I think that's why I've always sort of wanted that whole sense of that huge extended family, a huge supportive family, and people who do have big extended families because of different part. I feel like Indian people are like, we're a team, we're a family, we love each other, we're going to support each other, whereas sometimes, I'm not saying all, but with black people, it's like, oh shit, I think she's white now. You know? Oh, she has a white husband, ooh, she's not going to pass anymore.
She has a white
and like, oh, she thinks she has money now, so it's always been wanting from you, which is the difference I've seen. I'm not saying all, I'm saying in my personal experience. And that's why I've always loved, like I wanted to be part of this huge family. Everybody has that supportive and cultural pride.
Yeah, I found it interesting though because of Ubuntu, the South African concept of Ubuntu. Are you saying it's missing now?
I'm saying it's barely there. Those who practice it are people who actually think about it, and it's not just a black thing, it's people like you, people who want to come together and work for the betterment of the whole country. I think that's Ubuntu. The old idea of Ubuntu, raising a child as a village, all of this stuff has just fallen apart as this country has behaved. It has sort of ravaged black culture the way that things are at the moment.
And do you think that that's because there's a greater shift of classes? You mentioned that there are a lot of material that's been happening in society. And I'm wondering if I could swing or place a very talented black female who is an outstanding tennis player. But she's quite individualistic in her needs, and she wants to be the best in the world. And we don't quite get a sense of this is going to be shared in my community. Whereas with Samantha, who comes from mixed parenting, she almost feels she's playing for them. It's interesting that you mentioned, is it that materialism is driving some of these choices?
I think, you know, when a group of people haven't had something, and then all of a sudden there's an opportunity to get that something. I think there's a period of adjustment where perhaps we overdo it. Like I know young black professionals who drive cars that I can't even imagine the monthly installments, like, but they don't go to the neighborhood and keep their house. They see that I can afford a bottle of Moet. And look where I live in Mhlanga. But when you open their fridge, there's nothing in their fridge. You know what I mean? It's all about, look at me, I've reached here, you're still the township there.
There certainly are many people of Indian origin like that as well. People from white communities like that, from mixed race communities as well. And we meet them all the time. It's an overly materialistic world.
We get a little bit of a hint of that in one of the plays where we get a richer group of people, the Singhs, in real life where they actually have a lot more, they have money than they haven't moved out of the neighborhood, they remain there, it's seen as rich. And maybe similar to that of boasting about what you have or can have. I'm just wondering about identity politics then. Is it not possible, this closeness that you described, and it came up earlier in discussion of shooting, that some of it also then just masks what's actually going on? We don't get to develop the identity other than this that exists within that community. We all get classed as being the same.
And I also think there's like this fight to feel like you fit into a certain class. I'm not sure if any of you where you basically live, but I feel like there's a shift. Like every time I'm in town, the more you move up the upper highway, it's like the classier, the richer. It's almost as if the rich and the classier are running away from everybody else. You know, they're up there in the mountains by themselves. And then as a young black person, you're like, I want to live like that. So then I do everything I can so I can be part and live that life and see that other life. And that makes me feel like I'm a better person. Right. And that's the society we're living in now. Black people in themselves are being prejudiced as to what job you have. Like if you go on Black Twitter, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Black Twitter, but you'll hear things like girls will say, I'm not dating a man who can't give me a girlfriend allowance. Okay. If I'm dating a black man, he must give me a girlfriend allowance. He must pay for my rent. He must live in Lucas, or you know. So we are classes within ourselves now. It's no longer a race issue. It's how much are you walking out, and what car you drive, and then they do these things where they all now they are racing vehicles, and then driving to town and pretending they're able to look at the latest Land Rover or Bentley, and then drive and be like, hi. I think it's just destroyed us so much. We never had a progression of who we could build wealth properly. People aren't even educated about the money that they do make. Hence, spending it on a Bentley and Durban July and on girls and champagne compounds.
And don't you can keep Twitter. Stop loving recipes. And a number of magnificent BMWs in the Twitter.
Okay, well, in terms of racism and classism, I think saying racism has shifted a lot of focus, but still is there very strongly in terms of how we engage with each other and know each other more than we should. 26 years in democracy now, so it's not like it's something new. We should know each other better. But a lot of the narratives you're saying is also shifting to class. So a lot of things in terms of how we identify within certain groups is becoming more pronounced. So we get a racial group, black people comparing themselves with other racial groups from other race groups as well. But clearly we still remain within our race minds as well. So easy to talk about.
I would just say that, I mean, I think the most important point to make is that class still has a race nexus. Simply because, I mean, the vast majority of people who are living in poverty are still black African. So yes, there's a middle class growing in black communities, but the majority still live in poverty. This new world is not put anything for. So, you know, we say we're moving from a race-based struggle to a class-based struggle, but the class-based struggle still has a very strong place.
I think that also very strongly came across with the pandemic. It became even more pronounced to the people who were still being able to make money, the richer groups who were across the board, and poorer people becoming even more distinctly poor. And the face we often see is a black African child, which is something. And I know the two of you all also deal with young minds very often as well. So in terms of identity politics and trauma narratives, I think that we still very clearly have a highly traumatized society, and it influences how we shape identity. And a lot of our time, I think, is still being spent on surviving what is being our past. Are you seeing that with younger students when you deal with them, when you engage with them? Is there still very much a strong feeling of what's going on in South Africa that's traumatized?
They still living it. It's almost as if some of us are sort of, I don't know, as if we've moved away from it. There's still some people who are stuck in it. Like my students, the minute they see a white lecturer, they're like, whoa. They assume that person's going to be racist towards them. They assume that person's going to give them unnecessary work. They assume that person's not going to be understanding to their problems. to the point that when my mother-in-law came to visit me at work for play, they called her Van Beek. You know, so they're still living in that trauma, and they're actually scared of white people, even if you group people in the classroom. You're like, the white mountain, people be sitting by themselves and all that. Right. I don't want to associate with that person, or they're not going to like me, or I know nothing about that sort of person. So in my university, I think it's a lot. It's almost like people have chosen their own sort of apartheid. They are sticking back to those groups that were. There's still this huge amount of fear.
It's by and large our millennials. So that's why are you changing that?
I just don't think the government has done what it was supposed to do and what it promised. And now we're living in the consequences.
Well, I don't believe we've dealt with the trauma parts at all. You know that as a psychologist as well. You know, we have a Truth Reconciliation Commission that doesn't do enough to deal with this damaged psyche of so many people who walk around in society now, having experienced dehumanizing policies of apartheid at a micro level, to the extent where they are damaged people, incomplete people, and have no one to talk to about this, no professionals to deal with. Even if they have access to psychologists, they don't believe that they can grasp the complexity of these macro factors that influence their life to such an extent that they feel diminished. We've never dealt with that at all. And we still have much of the conditions of apartheid prevailing in contemporary South Africa anyway. So it's not like we have a completely different narrative to embrace. We've not dealt with our trauma at all. We live in a culture of violence. The only way we can deal with problems is resort to violence. This is why we have the crisis with gender-based violence. So much violence amongst our youth. Protest action turning to violence as an automatic reaction.
So how do we begin to deal?
Well, we need a national process of dialogue and professionals to run it, along with government, teachers to drive the process as well. I think we start at the national level where there is an open dialogue about this, and ask people what they want to do and how they want to do it. And then we can record these stories as well, the traumatic narratives, and share them. And then it does happen at institutional level, at university, at school. There must be support groups started to deal with this effectively. It mustn't just be people who are ticking boxes. That's what we have. It has to be openly confronted. One of the things that get together and tell racist jokes. Get it out there. Share these jokes openly and say why you think this is fun. And you realize how much stereotyping exists and why they think this is funny. They realize, I didn't even know that. It's actually knowledge transfer, overcoming the ignorance that exists. And that could be a starting point. So it's a much deeper process required than that. So, I mean, people have talked about, it's nothing new that I'm saying, but there's inertia when it comes to really getting it off the ground.
I can't even imagine how we would start to do that, because a lot of my friends of white circles, almost like they have a party fatigue. Like they don't want to talk about it anymore. They don't want to deal with it anymore. It wasn't me. It was my great-grandfather, whatever. I had nothing to do with it. Why are you blaming me? Why are you putting policies that disadvantage me? I can't find work. It would be so hard because we need everybody to come together. But it seems like my white contemporaries are just tired of it.
I don't know. It's interesting because I know that Germany is very different from what happens in war. They acknowledge it. And it's an important aspect for the youth to be aware that they don't treat people there. I mean, a center like this, people of South Africa working together on our unshared stories. The tremendous work that Selvan and the team have actually put together here. I think it would be nice if more schools, more young people actually visited institutions like this. They went home and maybe wrote their own stories, their own contributions. What happened in their lives, the generations that came before them, generations to come, so what they want those stories to be like. We own those narratives. So I just think we had a very long discussion, and it has been quite a dynamic group of discussions as well. So maybe instead of picking apart every single one of things, discussing them in detail, they will have seen a number of them on stage as well, you probably have read a number of them as well. I think the themes, what I was just trying to bring in, is that they're very strong themes. They have to be balanced very effectively, because obviously you have to have an audience that are interested. I think there's still lots of stories that need to be told, things that need to happen. But I think we can continue discussion beyond this, perhaps with the team. And is there anything else that you guys would like to contribute before? Well, okay, so this is one session. So, Nellie, thank you so much. Thank you, people. I know it's a long, long day, so maybe I should just end with the vote of thanks, just to say that we would like to express our sincere gratitude to the following people: the board of the 1860s Heritage Center for the use of this fine venue, Selvan, Naidoo, Singh, Nirode Bramdaw, Vikas Pansel, Anivesh Singh, and Clinton White for their support and technical assistance, Carolyn for shooting today's event and for technical expertise, Ella Thompson for editing of the novel Shooting, all the participants in today's event, the caterers, Nita and company. Just to tell you that the catering is actually outside this venue in view of COVID-19. I'll direct you to it at the end of this. Of course, we must also thank all of you for attending today and for adhering to COVID-19 protocols. To everyone who joined us online, thank you for your time and support. Just to mention that both books are available for purchase today. Shooting sells at 200 Rand and Durban Dialogues Dissected at 215 Rand. But today, because you've been so patient, such a wonderful audience, we have a special for you. You can get both books for 350 Rand. Please visit the MicroMega stand, which is just behind you towards the door. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join us for refreshments and let us engage further. So just to remind you that just out the door to the left is, or to my left, is where the refreshments are. You're welcome to bring it back into the venue. You can go outside and have some of it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this a very special
Felicity's live, so if you want to as well. No, she's not gonna say.
Okay, all right. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for everything done. Take care, stay safe, and drive safely. Thank you so much.
Great, it worked out well. This was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it worked out brilliantly, and I'm just amazed that, but I need to get that HDMI video because we need to migrate between the two. And
we've done quite a few
Zoom live.
Zoom live meetings. The ceremonies that wouldn't have so many people.
It's an ordinary camera. It's not.
I know. I love this. The technical cameras to really. So this is like an old place that even there's a housing, you can go in the water.
And I see you were zooming in and out, and so that was fine. I mean, but it works well for this Zoom set. So definitely use it. Thanks.
Did it stay online for
Yeah, it stayed. I mean, it was perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end it.
Thank you so much.